I got closed beta access to this unreleased game, and I'm about to give you my in-depth, unfiltered review and first impressions. This is Arena Breakout Infinite. Now, I just went over Gray Zone, another new extraction shooter, and pointed out a lot of the similarities to Escape from Tarkov. The genre is blowing up this year especially. Well, with this game, it's probably easier to tell you how it's different than Tarkov, because it's quite literally Escape from Tarkov. But it was also so much better in many areas that I was shocked. My overall impression of this, I wish this is what we had gotten with DMZ. So what is it if you're not even familiar? You fight against AI in the environment while completing missions to upgrade your vendors, the gear that you can purchase from them to go in more kitted out. You deploy into multiple maps to get those missions done with friends or solo, but as you're in completing the tasks, there's also other enemies working on their own in this time-limited raid, which of course you can kill and take all of their gear they bring in with, unless of course you die first and lose all of your gear. The value in this game is real for what you bring in. This also is still a more realistic or milsim style shooter. There's no hit markers, kill confirms, but they have made some changes to make this more of a fun video game experience that you can enjoy, and is really why I was loving it a lot more than my last experience with Tarkov. So, okay, how does Arena compare to Tarkov? And it's probably easier to tell you what's different than the same here, because even the maps are very similar in their overall design and themes. But starting out, there is a tutorial that actually teaches you how to play the game. It even has voice acting. The raids, when you go in, load much faster, even as I was going on a scav run, which is the exact same, but has some missions for those scav runs you do. Playing with friends is so much better though. As you're going in on those missions, your teammates can kill AI and you will get credit for them if it's a team objective, which there are. So friends can help you. There's no friendly fire, and there's even team icons, making PvP so much better, at least from this gaming perspective. Maybe not for realism, but for the same aspect of just picking up and playing with a random, you don't have to worry about them shooting you in the head and trying to take your gear. In fact, if you die and they try and take your gear out, you get your own gear back. Teammates can carry your gear out for you if you go down, and it'll instantly get mailed back to you without them having to bring it in on the next raid. My favorite thing, though, is that there's just a map. You can see exfil locations where you need to go to leave and just win that raid. On top of that, the missions you're doing are also marked on the map. All the stuff that you would need to just go to a third-party website and not play the game to do, you can just play the game and do. And I get some people will like the hardcore going in, trying to figure out a mission for a couple hours, whatever. There are still some challenges in finding keys that you need for rooms, but this just lets you play the game. Also on the map, you can put waypoints for your teammates to pull their own map up and see, including marking your missions so they can see exactly what you're working on. This doesn't clutter the actual screen though, because it just shows up on the compass at the top, not visually pinged like a live tag on Warzone. There's a lot of small things too, like even being overweight and managing your stamina. It seems like you can carry a lot more loot, which was my favorite era of Tarkov, when I could backpack, stack, and get just maximum amount of inventory out. You still will go overweight, and at a certain point need some type of enhancer to carry extra weight while still not moving in a crawl, but you don't move at absolute zero speed. And you also don't have to worry about leveling up your character's different attributes and playing for tons of hours to have the strength to then carry something, because you've spent it long enough running around overweight. Even healing, if both your arms and a leg is hurt, you can just take one heal, and once one arm is fully healed, it'll automatically start going to the next arm and then to the leg without having to apply a bunch of different heals over and over. You still have a individual system where If you're bleeding, you need a bandage to stop it, another med to increase the health, and if the limb is blacked out, another to bring that back to life, but it still reduces the number of actions you need to take. Same thing, you put a visor over your head. It doesn't add a whole tint over your screen where you can't see. Now, if it gets shot, the visor will be cracked, but this is a gripe I even have with Call of Duty, where why is the gas mask changing the color of the screen? I'd rather just play and see better. And there is still some visual on the screen with a bar at the top where I put a gas mask on, and it did decrease my FOV. But the looting, guys, I mean, ammo is color-coded, and it even shows you the tier of ammunition that is being used. Same thing with loot that you find in Raid. You can find purple or even orange items that you know immediately you want to get out of there, but it gets even better. You can double-click on it and see what is the estimated value for these items that you found. You don't even have to sort through the market and memorize what's worth bringing out and not. And yes, there is a public market, and the way that the economy is set up is you can sell things to vendors, but it's only going to be a tenth of what it's actually worth. If you really want the value, you need to put it on the market and have somebody else buy it. But why would anybody else buy it? Well, they can take that to then trade in for better armor with those same vendors. If, say, they only need a couple extra things to take, or they may need something for a mission. Now, I don't know how this is going to all balance out over time, but I can say a lot of my stuff was getting purchased off of the auction house already. There is a limit to how much you can do per week in terms of the items that you can sell, and the limit to how many items you can have on the market. So it still does make sense to vendor quite a bit of stuff. But if you have something really valuable, or if you know somebody's going to buy this certain optic or whatever, you can make a good amount of money off of that. So there still is some finessing and things that you need to learn and experience with it. But overall, it's just so much more accessible. Everything is easier to understand and do. And granted, I've already played a lot of Tarkov, so I understand a lot of the game already. But even just the fact that there's a tutorial and so many tips that pop up on screen where, oh, why can't I aim straight anymore? There's a tips, oh, you've used up too much of your arm stamina. There's a lot that's explaining to you what's happening as you're playing the game, which you can turn off as well if you know what you're doing. Overall, though, I love the audio. I could hear players moving. It wasn't a constant fly in my ear. The combat felt very fun. The hit reg actually felt great, and the blood splatter coming off of the people, just, I could tell when I was hitting them, seeing their body fall to the ground, the even sound effects of your feet stomping through the ground and going through a bush felt very accurate. Killing somebody and then actually being able to loot them and knowing you're getting value off of them also was extremely rewarding. And let me tell you, dying absolutely sucks, especially when you are stacked up or you've died a couple times in a row and your inventory is getting a little light. But you can also build your inventory unlimitedly versus like DMZ, which you have a certain wallet size and then that's it. That felt very low stakes where you can get much higher here. And I think this also leads to what some of the end game could be, which a lot of games are just completely missing now. You can, once hit level 14, start going into these paid raids where you have to have 80 grand worth of gear on you, which is a significant amount. You are a fully kitted up operator, and then pay an extra 15K to get into that raid. Now you're going up against everybody else who is equally kitted out, spent money to get there, and all of the AI, all of the loot and everything is out off the charts. You get so much more value. I only just completed my first one right before recording this, and oh my goodness, the fights were incredible. The loot was crazy. A really cool concept that I wish was in DMZ. Like, I wish we had some of this. The game was so quick, though. It felt like you really could just hop in for a round or two, do a quick scav run, which is something I always did appreciate about Tarkov for a quick raid, although sometimes it would take a very long time to get in. But we did one. Went in just on a scav, and I came out looted, and that was my loot for the entire day. I was so kitted. Such a rush for a come up. It just feels way easier to pick up and play, and I think the reason for that is probably rooted in that this is a mobile game. If you've heard of this before, it may be because it's available on mobile, even though this is brand new coming to PC. I played with my friends all day the last 2 days. We were doing missions together, helping each other out. It felt like we could actually really contribute, as well as then bring our own teammates' stuff out for them. when we weren't too over-kitted on the gear ourselves. But the PvP as a whole felt very common, and I think that also might be partly because the map is so much smaller. Fortunately, we are pretty good at the game too, so we came out on the up for the majority of them, but so far the PvP, I can't even compare it to Gray Zones. That game as a whole feels much more like an MMO, really, especially with the faction communication. And there's a lot that I had great to say in that last video even on it, but this feels very much more like the classic Extraction and Tarkov. What I really appreciated too is that I didn't die to any one-taps from AI the whole time I've played so far. Although they definitely are a threat, and they do expose your position to getting third-party. You have to be careful with it. They did feel pretty good, and if you do end up dying, you get a full after-action report of how you died, who killed you, what type of ammo were they using against, what type of armor did you have, what was the penetration. It's like so much great information. And then at the end of your raid, if you do make it out, you get to see a map of where you went, what fights you got into, where you got big loot. Like, it's such a done game. It's kind of insane. On top of that, like, the frame rate was very good. The graphics look good, but I've said so much praise for this. I know you're already yelling at me, but it's not all good, right? Obviously, I enjoy a good new game, but there were problems too. One of them being, maybe the game's going to go away. They might get sued out by Tarkov and shut down. Although we've seen a lot of games take from other games ideas and concepts, and in this case, I know there's been posts, although maybe not the most trustworthy of sources, that have said this is exact copies of code through data mining, and I don't know enough about it to speak to it. If Nikita sues the game or gets it removed from Steam, though, your game that you spend money on could go away. The biggest thing, though, is this is a free-to-play game, which you might be rejoicing on initially. However, the pay-to-win elements that I have at least already heard from all of the mobile players is terribly bad. That being, you will run out of cash so fast from continuing to die, and it is so hard to make money and get on the come up in the game that you are going to be out of luck and swiping that credit card very fast on this. That could be a positive for some players who are really good at the game, then going in and killing the players that have then spent all the money and don't know what they're doing, collecting a whole bunch of cash and loot. However, even to just have a secure stash, for example, you will have to pay a subscription to the game to keep the battle pass going. That will then allow you to have a secure stash, where when you die, you will keep whatever loot that is in there and even get bigger ones for more money spent. At any point, you can spend money to get more cash in the game and then just go buy more stuff. Now, we don't know how they're going to implement it onto this game. I will say, after playing the game for these last few days, I ended up going positive $200,000, starting at $500,000. However, like I said, I am pretty decent at the game, and I was playing with my friends who were helping me quite a bit. I also am a bit concerned of the amount of content that's on the game. It does feel more like an arena that is smaller, which I think is why you get into more PvP battles. But at the same time, it felt very repetitive being on the map. I know I tuned into a bunch of different streams to see this, and it was always on the same map by this broken down bridge in the middle. I was like, it's kind of the same thing over and over. But then I went out to Woods on the second map, or Valley, it's called in this game, and it was much bigger and sprawling, and I have heard from the mobile players that it does get much bigger as you go into the bigger maps. It's kind of the lead into, the rest of the game. You start small and get bigger. A concern that I always have with games is how much is this really going to be supported going into the future? Performance-wise as well, while I was mostly getting very high frame rate and impressed with the graphics, the stuttering that was happening in this game, regardless of how I was changing my settings, was pretty persistent, and all of my friends were getting this. I think a lot of that is to be expected in any early version of a game in general. Heck, I mean, Call of Duty is not an early version of its game, and it's still completely plagued with bugs. Because all of this is so new, we don't know the level of support that we're going to get for this game over time, and that means we're going to have to wait and see before we know how well it's really supported and updated. What I would also like to see changed is some way to resurrect a teammate. I think this is already diverted enough off of the true hardcore milsim element to where not being able to play with your team when you're in a squad, you die out, you got to go do a scav run and try and time your way to go back and play with your friends. It's just super annoying, and it was something that I think DMZ did solve very well, being able to have a long res that you could get off on your teammate to get him back in the game. You guys can continue to play together and just have some fun. I know you can get knocked out in the game as well, although it didn't happen to us in the experience. It'd also be great if it was clear in what your teammate's gear is, especially if another player picks it up and then takes it, or you drop it onto another player, and then it can start to get confusing when there's a bunch of bodies around. You think you found some great stuff, take it out, and then it turns out to not be in your inventory and sent back to your buddy. I like that system a lot as well, but it also means you're kind of screwed if you're playing solo. And when I went in solo, ran into a duo that was coming up against me, I got owned, and there's no way I get any of that stuff back. It'd be nice if there was at least some type of insured system for that if they do decide to not take it. Make it a little bit less punishing, but I think that also goes towards them wanting you to just spend more money on the game. So yeah, I have a lot of good things to say on this, but I was just so pleasantly surprised playing it. But I think part of the big reason for that, the final thing I got to note, is just how much is truly copied from Escape from Tarkov, which does make me feel a little bit weird. I don't feel like I'm really the authority to be like, hey, this needs to, what can I do? I think it's going to be up to Steam. It's going to be up to whoever can look into this and how coding works. Was it copied? Was it not? I have no clue, but the concepts are Tarkov. All of it is better for how I enjoy to play games. It is just more gamified, simpler, and I can kind of just enjoy the experience of what is happening. And so I really liked it, man. I'll probably be playing more. I'll let you know after maybe I'm through the honeymoon phase if what pisses me off more about it. I'm sure once we get later, I think it's really gonna be the pay to win elements. I experienced the same thing playing through Lost Ark and seeing what the end game of that was like and how bad it was having to pay, especially when they're incentivized to do so to make more money and can always change this in the future to make it worse. If they do get more players, whatever. I'm going to upload more full-length videos of this over on my Stone Mountain Beyond channel. So make sure you're subscribed here, but check that out too if you want to see some more of it in action. And please, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Have you played on mobile? How does it compare? I haven't seen it yet. Would you want to see more content from me on this? Or should I just go back to Tarkov? Although, man, that seems even more painful now. And are you going to be checking it out? That's for this one, though. Thanks so much for watching.